Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're diving deep today into something I'm sure is on a lot of minds right now, and that's what Trump being back in the White House means for the economy, especially for you investors out there.
Yeah, it's definitely a big one.
Big one for sure. And you guys sent in a ton of sources, news articles, expert takes, even a TED Talk in the mix.
Wow.
So clearly you want the full picture here. How's this election going to hit your wallets? And I got to say, some of the initial reactions, kind of surprising.
It has been pretty interesting to see, that's for sure. Like, right off the bat, globally, things went a little haywire. That NPR article we've got, it highlights just how volatile things got when those election results came in.
Yeah, I saw that one too.
Currencies, commodities, the stock market, everything was all over the place.
So what is it about this particular election that spooked the market so much?
Well, markets, they don't like uncertainty. And a leadership change like this, especially with someone like Trump who can be a bit unpredictable, it just throws up a whole bunch of questions. What's the policy going to look like going forward? Nobody knows. And investors, they hate not knowing.
It makes sense. Uncertainty makes it a lot tougher to figure out where the risk is, right?
Yeah.
How do you make smart investment decisions when the ground is constantly shifting under you?
Exactly. It's like, how do you even aim when you don't know what you're aiming at? And then you've got the whole tariff man thing coming back. Remember that Fortune article? Trump actually owns that title, even says it in Chinese. Oh!
Ooh.
Yeah, I remember that. But how do tariffs actually impact investors like our listeners? I mean, are tariffs always a bad thing? Not always, no. You see, tariffs, they can actually make stuff made here in the U.S. more competitive. Could be a good thing for some industries. But the flip side is they can also make prices go up for, everyday people. And if people are spending more on just basic stuff, that can slow down the whole economy. There's a report from the Peterson Institute, and they estimate that middle-income families could be shelling out an extra $1,700 to $2,600 each year.
Oof, that's not jump change.
Not at all.
So as an investor, you got to think about how those rising costs might change how people shop. Because ultimately, that's going to impact corporate profits, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then on top of that, there's the whole Federal Reserve situation. That CNBC article we have, it suggests that Trump might not keep Jerome Powell on as the Fed chair. Could be huge.
Yeah, the Fed chair, they set interest rates. And those interest rates, they affect everything. Mortgages, business loans.
Everything, yeah.
So yeah, changing leadership there could definitely shake things up.
Oh, for sure. And if you're looking at who might win and who might lose in all of this, that NPR article points out sectors like banking, tech, and defense. They could actually do pretty well under Trump. He's usually all about deregulation and tax cuts, and we're already seeing some of those stocks going up.
Interesting. But I mean, it can't be all good news, right?
Yeah.
That same NPR article, it also mentions some potential downsides.
Yeah.
Like what about European companies? A lot of them rely heavily on trade with the U.S.
Right, and that's where things could get tricky. The article quotes a Barclays analyst who's basically warning that higher tariffs on European goods, that could hurt them pretty bad, lead to job losses, and then in the end, even less demand for American products. It's all connected.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you can't just look at what's happening here in the U.S., right?
Yeah.
Investors got to be thinking about the bigger picture, the global impact. It's all one big tangled web. Okay, so we've got tariffs, a potential shakeup at the Fed, a global ripple effect. Anything else investors should have on their radar?
Well, that NPR article, it brings up another thing that I know a lot of investors are already worried about: the U.S. national debt. Trump's spending during his first term, it really added to that debt. And there are concerns that a second term could make things even worse.
Yeah, debt's a big one. Investors are always watching that because it can really affect interest rates and how stable the economy is overall.
Exactly. If the debt's higher, lenders usually want higher interest rates, which means it costs the U.S. government more to borrow money, and then that trickles down, makes it more expensive for businesses to invest and grow. You see where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah, I'm starting to see a pattern here. Lots of uncertainty, the potential for costs to go up, a whole lot of unknowns.
That's a pretty good summary of where we're at, yeah. And this is where that Columbia News piece comes in. It's really relevant, actually. Professor Mishkin, he's expressing some worries about whether the Federal Reserve will be able to stay independent under Trump. If Trump starts pressuring the Fed to keep interest rates low, even though the debt's going up, that could lead to inflation. And that's bad news for everyone because it means your money buys you less.
So it's almost like walking a tightrope. Investors, they need to weigh the potential good stuff like tax cuts and deregulation against the risks of more debt, maybe inflation, and the market going haywire.
Exactly. It's complicated, no easy answers. But the more you understand the potential risks and the potential rewards, the better decisions you can make. It's all about navigating this new landscape as best you can. Hashtag TTS, the Deep Dive, episode 2024-11-11, part 2 of 3. And, another area where things could get really interesting is, well, climate action and what that means for investments. We saw a big push for green energy under Biden. All that sustainable tech, it was really taking off. But now, with Trump back, things could change pretty drastically. Both the TED Talk and that NPR article, they both highlight how likely it is we'll see a reversal there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, a lot of investors put their money into green tech, renewable energy. If the government starts favoring fossil fuels again, that's going to impact those investments.
Absolutely. And, Trump's administration, they might even try to roll back some of what was in the Inflation Reduction Act. Big shift.
It would be. But there's this New York Times article we got. It presents a kind of different angle. They quote this expert from Columbia, and he's arguing that if the federal government steps back from climate action, it'll be up to individual states to take the lead.
Interesting. So instead of looking at what's happening nationally, you got to zoom in on individual states, see what they're doing.
Exactly. The states that really commit to renewable energy, to sustainability, they could become the new hot spots for green tech investment, even if the federal government's not on board.
Yeah, it's like their own little mini economies, each with their own rules, their own investment opportunities. And, speaking of individuals making a big splash, we got to talk about Elon Musk. Those USA Today and Guardian articles, they suggest that Trump winning could give Musk a whole lot of power.
Yeah, they make it sound like Trump and Musk could end up being pretty chummy. And that could mean big things for Musk's companies, like Tesla and SpaceX. Think deregulation, tax breaks, maybe even government contracts. It's definitely something Tesla investors should be keeping an eye on.
Oh, for sure. Imagine SpaceX getting a ton of government money to do space exploration. Or Tesla getting even more help with taxes and regulations. Their stock could go through the roof.
It's exciting, but also kind of risky, right?
Yeah.
You're betting a lot on one guy. And Musk, well, he's not exactly known for being predictable.
True. And that brings up another point investors need to think about. The whole social and political climate. It's not just about numbers. This word in black analysis, it argues that Trump's win wasn't just about policy. It was about something deeper, this kind of cultural anxiety, resentment. That stuff doesn't just disappear. It could have a big impact on how markets move, how people spend their money.
Makes sense. We've seen how much uncertainty freaks out the markets. And then you add this deeply divided country, all this tension, anxiety. It's a recipe for unpredictability.
Yeah, exactly. And don't forget, markets are driven by emotion too, not just logic. Those articles from Vox and Amsterdam News, they quote some Columbia professors who are worried about stress levels going up, mental health issues under a second Trump term. That kind of stuff can definitely affect how people invest. When you're stressed, anxious, you're more likely to make impulsive decisions, not always the best ones.
So it's not just about the numbers, the data. It's about understanding how people feel, how that affects their choices. Being aware of your own emotions, not letting fear or greed take over.
It's a tough time to be an investor. You've got to be informed, but also cautious. The rules are changing. Things are in flux.
So, given all that, what are the big takeaways for our listeners? What should they be focusing on as they try to figure out this new economic landscape?
Okay, first up, keep a close eye on the Federal Reserve. That's number one. How Trump handles the Fed, how much influence he has over their policies, that's going to be huge. It affects interest rates, inflation, the whole health of the economy. Remember, the Fed, they control borrowing costs for everyone, individuals, businesses, the whole shebang.
Right, that makes sense.
What else? Okay, number two, pay attention to the sectors that stand to win or lose under Trump. We talked about some potential winners already. Banking, tech, defense, maybe even crypto. But some areas are going to get hit. Think manufacturing, retail, renewable energy. You got to figure out where the ripple effects are going to land.
Okay, that's two big things to keep in mind. What's number three?
Don't forget about the global picture. What Trump does here, especially with trade and tariffs, that's going to have big consequences for international markets, for global economic growth. Keep up with how other countries are reacting to him because it's all going to affect your investments one way or another. We're in a globalized world, remember? What happens in one place affects everyone else.
Good advice. So it's all about staying informed, being ready to adapt, thinking long term.
Exactly. And maybe the most important thing, don't let fear or greed take the wheel. Do your research, understand your own risk tolerance, and make choices that line up with your goals. Don't panic.
Great advice. And sometimes the smartest move is to just wait and see how things shake out.
Oh yeah, patience is key. And a little bit of healthy skepticism never hurts.
Because, even the experts, they don't always get it right. And even when they do, stuff happens that nobody could have predicted.
True. That's why it's so important to stay informed, be flexible, roll with the punches. The economic landscape is always changing. But even with all this uncertainty, there are still opportunities out there. You just got to know where to look and be ready to jump when you see them. Hashtag TTS The Deep Dive episode 2024 1111, part 3 of 3.
Going through all these sources, one thing that really stuck with me is this idea of America being resilient, especially when it comes to the economy, even with all this political turmoil.
Yeah, that's a good point. A few of the articles, Professor Naftali's in the New York Times, they really hit on that. He talks about Trump winning as a kind of bet. Like, can the American system handle someone trying to, you know, game it, exploit it? Can it bounce back?
So are investors making that same bet, betting on the system to hold up?
I think in a way, yeah. Every time you invest, you're betting on the future, right? And right now, a lot depends on whether those institutions, those rules that the American economy is built on, whether they can survive all the stuff that's coming.
It's not just about picking the right stock, it's about believing in the whole system.
Exactly. And that belief, it's going to be put to the test for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some big challenges ahead, the debt, inflation, all the division in the country. But, history shows us that the American economy, it's pretty good at adapting, at coming up with new solutions.
Just no matter what hits it, it always finds a way to come back stronger.
Right. And for investors, that creates opportunities, but risks too, of course. If you can figure out which companies, which sectors are going to be able to handle these challenges, you could do really well.
So it's not just about riding it out, it's about finding the companies that can actually thrive in all this chaos.
Exactly. Find the companies that are building the lifeboats, basically, the ones that'll keep you afloat when the next economic storm hits.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So to wrap up, we've covered a ton of ground today. Tariffs, the Fed, the debt, climate change, Elon Musk, even how people's emotions play into all of this.
It's been a lot, but hopefully it gives everyone listening a better sense of what might be coming, the risks and the opportunities.
Exactly. And remember, this is just the start of the conversation. We want to hear from you guys. What were your biggest takeaways from today? What questions are still bugging you as you try to figure out this new economic reality?
Head over to our website, leave a comment, send us a message, whatever works. We're all in this together, and the more we share, the more we all learn.
Until next time, happy investing.